So, okay, let's move on to something else here, too. Justin Trudeau, Canada. This is my home country. Look, I think this is important because a lot of Americans don't realize how quickly this can come to you here. Just how quickly you can lose your rights. If you want to see how quickly, look to Canada. And this is the country to whom leftists are constantly directing your attention. We could be more like Canada. If Donald Trump wins, I'm moving to Canada. I love Canada because of their lax gun laws, said Alec Baldwin. But he didn't understand that they don't have lax gun laws. They actually have very strict gun laws. He just likes shooting people.
Yeah. They still don't let you commit murder, Alex.
It's his calling card.
So,
accidental murder on purpose.
Right. I don't know the legal classification, but he's a dick.
Yeah, that's what it is. He just careless murder.
Right. So Justin Trudeau is back to being, a tyrant, and this time he's now banning any new ownership of handguns. So we have him here discussing. This is the Prime Minister of Canada for people who don't follow. For people who aren't Canadian, you probably don't. No one really cares, but it does matter. Here he is discussing the new ban at a press conference.
We're introducing legislation to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership.
Sorry, we screwed up. Our mistake.
our bad.
We have the actual clip right here.
We're introducing legislation to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership.
How about no?
What this means is that it will no longer be possible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in Canada. In other words, we're capping the market for handguns.
Look how smug, how self-satisfied he is. Like, in other words, no criminals will get their hands on any of these.
No. We don't border Detroit.
Right. And it's not a real border. It's really just a tunnel.
To a casino.
So besides banning, and we're going to get to the timeline of Uvalde, which I think is really important because a lot of people have inaccurate timelines, but this is relevant to that because you're seeing how the world is using it as a springboard for pushing, I don't want to say anti-gun policies, anti-human rights policies. So
there you go.
Besides the banning of all handguns, it's also going to require military-style assault weapons to be turned over via a mandatory buyback.
Confiscation. Why don't you just write confiscation?
Let's be clear. That's what it is in Australia. Let's do the math here. When they say a mandatory buyback, because the left has sold you on buybacks, by the way.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke talked about a buyback. In Australia, it was a mandatory. What's a mandatory buyback? It's the government is going to, look, they're not buying back a gun that you bought from the government, so it's not a buyback.
Right.
It's just we're taking your gun and we're going to give you some money so that you go along with it. If you don't go along with
half the value of it.
right?
Yeah, it's like eminent domain for your house.
Exactly.
This is the same thing for guns.
And if you don't go involuntarily with the mandatory buyback, how do they enforce it? By their guys with guns. Just to be clear, their guys with guns will take your guns mandatorily. Now, here's the thing. They're also saying assault weapons. Okay, maybe Canada's a little further ahead of the curve than we are, and they have a clear definition because we don't really know what that means in the United States. Oh, here's a problem. There's no legal definition. So Prime Minister Blackface said, the government would seek to come up with one that could not be easily circumvented by gun makers. Okay, shouldn't you know that before you try and press a law?
That's a fair point.
Also, I'm not so much concerned about laws, technicalities as it relates to assault weapons being circumvented by gun makers. I'm more so concerned about you circumventing people's basic human rights by creating arbitrary laws like pistol grip illegal, rifle grip legal, just new ways to control people's God-given right to self-defense. And that's what it is. It's your right to self-defense.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they never came out with a definition for that because right now, he said, until then, we'll have it on a case-by-case basis where they basically just get to decide, okay, on a case-by-case basis, we don't like that gun, we don't like that gun, we don't like that gun. Sorry, we haven't found one that we do like. It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember during lockdowns, though, it worked really well in Australia.
Yes.
And judging by all the masked people behind him and him unmasked, it's no prediction of the future.
No, not at all. Oh, they also did a pit bull ban in Canada and the UK. And look, and I understand there's people who are
He's a
against
terrible musician.
All right, anyone who plays Gasolina after Labor Day wearing white pants.
Yeah, it's just not fair.
No, they did a pit bull ban, but then people were losing their white boxers.
Really?
Because they're like, well, it looks like a pit bull. So whether you're for or against a pit bull ban, you can't just have it on a case-by-case basis. You do need to have a definition because then they were taking away bulldogs. They were taking away white boxers. They were taking away American bulldogs, which they are not pit bulls at all. They're bully breeds, but neither is a mastiff. This is something that's important. And so when you do it on a case-by-case basis and the government is the one who determines the case, that ends up being a serious problem.
That's tragic and stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, but it happened in
know
Canada.
where else to put it. I didn't even know that happened.
Yep. It's happened in the UK, too. Joe Louis would be illegal in the UK.
Because he looks like a pit bull.
Yeah, there's zero pit in him.
Oh, I know, yeah.
But people see him, they're like, he looks like a big pit. That's how stupid it is. And I've had to experience it. I have to educate people. No, he's not a pit bull. And they're not really fighting dogs. They're hunting dogs. But the point is, it's a silly country. And guess what? If your rights are not inalienable, meaning that your rights aren't given to you, granted to you by God, even if you're an atheist, you should appreciate that the Constitution says our job is not to grant rights. Our job is to recognize rights. And then you can have George Carlin saying, rights are made up, man, as he speaks freely in the United States, which he wouldn't be allowed to do in other countries, like our friends who were arrested for being stand-up comedians. Now, here's something else. There is, it's important to note, there's no, I guess it's not something else. It's based on what I was discussing. There's no constitutional right to own a firearm in Canada.
Right, yeah.
1993, there was a Canadian Supreme Court case, and it ruled that Canadians, unlike Americans, do not have a constitutional right to bear arms. So to be clear, they're proud of it.
That's the ballgame.
And what do they say when they say a mandatory buyback? They are going to take Canadians' guns away. They justify it by saying, well, what are you going to do? We don't have a constitution. Now, let's go to the United States. What do they say? Well, the Second Amendment isn't absolute. We don't need the Constitution. Look at the court case, Heller versus D.C. They didn't argue, bump stock. They didn't argue, Class 3 stamp. They said, private citizens, you have no right to own a firearm whatsoever. That is exclusively for the military and cops. That's what Canada is doing right now. That's exactly what they want here in the United States.
By the way, I don't know if you knew this. I mean, being from Canada a little bit, that they have it to where you can't fire more than 5 rounds without having to reload. So the magazine capacity limit is 5 rounds. Did you know that?
Sounds like Tokugawa there on his honeymoon.
I mean, can you imagine though? 5 rounds. There we go. Fine. And a home intruder. Bang, bang. I miss. Okay, I'm trying to hit again. Bang, bang, bang. I'm nervous. And now, now I'm just dead.
You're failing to understand in the equation. The gangbangers breaking into your house, they too only have 5 rounds.
Yes, because they always play by the rules. I thought actually they said most of their gun crime in Canada was committed by people who had illegally smuggled the guns in from the United States.
That's
And
ridiculous.
so, just like Pennsylvania or the state of New York actually will blame blame Pennsylvania or some other state
blame
because
Indiana.
their gun laws aren't tight enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Indiana blames
Illinois blames Indiana.
Yeah,
Chicago blames
Wisconsin.
Indiana. Yeah, of course.
Detroit.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is we need,
but they don't have that gun crime there in Wisconsin, and they have it in Chicago, but it's Indiana's fault.
But if you play this out, Canada, the United States, Mexico, and every other South American country, all the way down to wherever, has to have the same gun laws. Otherwise, they can just be like, well, they just keep coming in illegally from them.
I love how he just ran out of countries to name.
I did.
Yeah.
I was going to say Argentina, Chile, they both go down all the way.
Chile, I love how that's the only one he pronounces that way. He didn't say Mexico.
We all call it Chile.
Patagonia.
Peru.
Peru.
Do you want to talk about Brazil?
Brasilia.
Yeah, how are you going to pronounce it?
Brazil.
Montevideo.
Do you pronounce Spain? España?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
Rica. You got to roll
Going
it.
to the Dominican Republic.
So, of course, by the way, Trudeau used this as an opportunity to shame America. And this is one of those things where people say find common ground. He's using this to shame America. We're saying the same thing, only he's like, isn't America terrible? And I'm reading what he's saying, hearing what he's saying, going, aren't we better than Canada? So here he is saying, we need only look south of the border to know that if we do not take action firmly and rapidly, it gets worse and worse and worse and more difficult to counter. Yeah, of course, because there's nary a gun crime in Canada. I don't know if you know this. My hometown, Montreal, we were the pioneers for school shootings, mass shootings. Now,
really?
Is this anecdotal? Sure, but I experienced this in my lifetime. Right? At École Polytechnique, that was 1989, I believe it was. 19 women were killed. They were lined up execution style. I think the guy lost his job of like an affirmative action thing. He was pissed off. Or it was 14. I don't know, it was 19, it was 14. It was somewhere between 14 and 19 women. I can't remember how many were killed, how many were injured. I know it was at least 14 were killed. There was the Concordia shooting in 1992. 4 people were killed. That's a major university. There was Dawson College. My friends were there in 2006. I did a stand-up show at Dawson the next year in 2007. 1 person was killed, 19 were injured because the shooter was not very capable. Here's something even scarier to me when you're not just talking about mass shootings. In Nova Scotia, there was a man who killed 23 people on multiple separate occasions and locations. He was just roaming for days with his gun, killing people.
Wow.
The cops no one could do anything because no one had guns.
Gosh.
Scott Thompson from Kids in the Hall, I was reading the book about them. He was involved in a school shooting. The kid who sat behind him shot a bunch of people. That was in the 70s in Canada.
Wow. I didn't.
Yeah.
Where was he?
I think outside of Toronto, I think.
Okay.
I believe.
But think of how scary that is. Not just one event, a shooting, and they get swarmed by police, but one guy just roaming around with a gun, and he knows he can do this unfettered. 23 people killed. Hey, there's something very similar that happened here in Texas, Sutherland Springs. Guy shot up a church, and he was getting into his car to go to another church and shoot it up, and he was stopped by Stephen Williford with an AR-15, who, by the way, was on this show that night. This was the first show that he did, because he didn't trust the media to portray the actual story. And guess what? When they talk about mass shootings, they never include Sutherland Springs. It's one of the most deadly ever.
No, absolutely. And one of the things you saw there in 2020, that's when that last shooting happened in Nova Scotia. That's when they started pushing this gun legislation. In New Zealand, they did their mandatory buybacks, their mandatory whatever, right after they had a mass shooting. In Australia, they did their mandatory buyback right after they had a mass shooting. And I know a number of liberals out there are probably like, that's the appropriate response. No, you don't give up your rights because you're all of a sudden afraid. I get it. It sucks to live in a world where you can die or your kids can die in a senseless act of violence. You fix the problem. Getting rid of guns doesn't fix the problem. It just ensures that bad guys are the only ones that are going to have guns. Period. That's it.
And I try to avoid the abortion and gun control comparison because I think a lot of people make it and it can be lazy. But I do think there's an important delineation to make here that people often miss. They go, oh, you want to ban abortions and it's going to be, then people are going to get illegal, but you're saying ban guns? No. Here's kind of the subtext that I think people miss. It's sort of like the prohibition and war on drugs. You're talking about something different, right? When we enacted prohibition, you're talking about an activity in which 90-something% of Americans engaged and made it illegal. That's going to be a problem because behaviorally people have already developed that, this is a part of the culture, whereas legalizing all drugs, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't legalize all drugs. I'm not talking about the war on drugs. I'm saying you're taking some of the very few, only a few percent of Americans actively engage in, and then saying, all right, go nuts. So it's different. The way that it would actually affect human behavior in the country is different. The same thing when people say, okay, abortion, let's compare it to gun control. What you are saying is if we outlaw abortion or late-term abortion or any abortion in any capacity, what you are saying is that lifetime law-abiding women en masse are going to go break the law and get illegal abortions. However, if we ban firearms, lifetime serial criminals are going to start obeying the law. The difference there is you were talking about in the abortion case, women who are law-abiding, and you have to make the leap that all of a sudden they'll break the law. You have to believe the exact flip of that with gun control, that criminals who've already continually broken the law and decided to commit mass murder will obey the law. See that difference? It's an important difference to understand.
Well, it's also assuming that somebody with a handgun is going to do, it just doesn't make sense. You think sort of the shotgun's not going to kill as many people? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you already have laws in Canada where you have to reload. You have to have 5-round capacity, right?
Well,
and that's it. So you're telling me that that's not enough. Now, no new handguns.
But it's like going, you kind of have knives with green handles. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I've never seen gun reform that makes sense. Say something that might make sense.
Yeah.
How about if an 18-year-old twitchy kid comes into your store, maybe you'd look into it harder.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you have to, and people might get mad at that. I don't care. Like, there's certain things that you could say that might actually make sense, but instead, they leap to the most ridiculous thing possible.
Well, not only that, but even if they try and pass common sense gun reform, what do they say? Say, well, this is a compromise.
It never is, though.
What a compromise is a give and take, right? Yeah. There's never a give. So let's even look at the red flag laws. That's something where people talk about, okay, people who should be flagged, people who, your neighbor, basically, or people who are concerned for your well-being, your mental health, that they can flag you to the FBI or to the local authorities. Okay. That's the idea. And it sounds to people, it sounds good on its surface. Of course, we all know how that can be abused, but that's a...
Or never listened to.
Right.
Mainly.
That's a take. What's the give? How about this? And I'm not saying that we should do this, but I've never seen this attached to the red flag laws. And by the way, anyone who abuses the red flag law and falsely flags somebody is sentenced to 10 years in a federal penitentiary and fined up to $500,000. How about that? So it's just as stern of a punishment to use it frivolously. Yeah. That would be a give and take. I think you might get more people on board with it because then it makes it something serious. But when you just say, hey, red flag laws, and people who are anti-gun anyway have no skin in the game, just like they can report parents to CPS if they don't put their kid on puberty blockers, guess what? It's only a take.
Yeah. Well, and it was the same thing with the no-fly list. You remember how many people got put on the no-fly list? They're like, oh, it's a fantastic thing. And this person, like, what?
Yeah.
Because they're a
senators run no-fly list. I think exactly. Stephen Hayes, the commentator, was on a no-fly list.
Well, no, it was just if you had a common name. That's what happened, is you were put on a no-fly list.
Right. Yeah. That's the take. What's the give?
Yeah.
Right.
What's the give? Government can only take. Again, because government doesn't serve to give. Our government serves to recognize. That's why we are so different from these other countries. People need to understand that. You don't have the right to free speech in Canada. It doesn't exist. You don't have the right to self-defense in Canada.
Watch Louder with Crowder live, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.